So before I get into this video, I've got to give a shout out to my man Rick, who is my Facebook friend. If you want to add me on Facebook, there's a link in the description below. And Rick asked me what my thoughts were on the recent pay-per-view figures that Eddie Hearn alluded to of Anthony Joshua versus Charles Martin. And I'd actually, I'd watched the video, the interview that Eddie Hearn had done with IFL TV. And I remembered his comments about pay-per-view figures, but I'd actually forgotten them, if I'm completely honest. So I appreciate Rick jogging my memory and giving me the prompt to make a video on this subject. So in the video with IFL TV, Eddie Hearn said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing, yeah, if you want to get the direct quote, you can go on IFL TV's channel and watch the interview with Eddie Hearn. It's the interview that was filmed in the aftermath, like a day or two after, of Anthony Joshua versus Charles Martin. But Eddie Hearn says something to the effect of, we weren't sure how many pay-per-views this was going to do. Could it do 600,000, 700,000, 800,000, 900,000, a million? You know, in the end, we ended up doing the bottom end of those numbers. So, in other words, what I'm taking from that, and I presume what Eddie Hearn is alluding to, is that this fight did somewhere in the region of 600,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, I get a lot of comments from people on my Twitter, on my Facebook, about their heavyweight hopes. And usually, heavyweight hopes tend to be associated with nationality. For example, I get a huge amount of emails from people from New Zealand. Shout out to everybody who watches me from New Zealand, talking about Joseph Parker. I get one or two tweets from the Scandinavians talking about Robert Helenius or talking about Adrian Granat. You know, it seems to be the way. And I think every country, every nation believes they've got a heavyweight hope who is going to captivate the millions and be a superstar. And who knows, we could be entering a golden era of heavyweight boxing. But what I will say is, Anthony Joshua, in his 16th pro fight, has just sold out the best part of 20,000 tickets at the O2 Arena. And according to Eddie Hearn, circa 600,000 pay-per-view buys at £17 a go. So, let's just look at that in terms of the amount of revenue that Anthony Joshua brought in. Now, I'm doing this without a calculator, so excuse me if my maths has gone slightly awry here. But let's say he sold 20,000 tickets and the average ticket price was £50. And I suspect the average ticket price would have been a lot higher than £50, by the way, because I'm sure some of those ringside tickets were selling for £1,000 a bunch. But let's say he sold 20,000 tickets at 50 quid a go. That's £1 million, right? Then let's say he sold 600,000 pay-per-views at £17 a go. Well, if it was 600,000 pay-per-view buys at £10 a go, it would be 6 million. So let's say £17 a go, let's say somewhere in the region of 10 or 11 million through pay-per-view. So Anthony Joshua's bought in, let's say 11, 12 million between ticket sales and pay-per-view sales. In addition to that, you've got sponsorship revenue, you know, and the like. So we're talking about a huge money earner in his 16th professional fight against an opponent in Charles Martin, where yes, he was a world champion, but let's be honest, Charles Martin wasn't as well known or as well marketed as the likes of a Tyson Fury or a Deontay Wilder or a David Haye. So you've got those numbers there. Now, we also know Anthony Joshua did something in the region of 450,000 for a British title fight against Whyte. So this isn't a one-off, this is sustained, successful box office figures. And we also know that Eddie Hearn said Anthony Joshua Whyte did nearly as well as Vladimir Klitschko Tyson Fury on Sky. So we are safe to assume that Tyson Fury Vladimir did circa 500,000, Joshua versus Martin did circa 600,000, and Joshua versus Whyte did circa 450,000. Now, I think that shows the size and the potential of the UK heavyweight pay-per-view market. And I've got to say, if you're a Joseph Parker fan, if you're an Adrian Granat fan, if you're a Robert Helenius fan, you know, if you're a fan of one of these heavyweights who's got a huge following domestically in their nation, I don't see there being as live a market for heavyweight boxing and for pay-per-view boxing as there is in Britain right now. I just don't. It's rumoured that Manny Pacquiao, Tim Bradley did 150,000 buys. It's rumoured that Golovkin Lemieux did 100,000 buys. And we've got guys over here doing 3, 4, 5 times those numbers in their 15th and 16th pro fights. And a lot of credit needs to go to Anthony Joshua. A lot of credit needs to go to Eddie Hearn for the way they built him. I know people over here don't like the pay-per-view market, but this is turning boxing into a whole nother level. And it really shows the scope of this market for a fight of the magnitude of a Joshua Hay or a Joshua Fury or even a Fury Hay, if that were to happen. I mean, realistically, I think if built correctly, if Tyson Fury goes and defeats Vladimir Klitschko, and if Anthony Joshua remains undefeated, has 1 or 2 voluntaries, maybe defeats Joseph Parker in his mandatory, which is absolutely no certainty, by the way, because Parker's a good fighter. But let's say both guys get to Wembley Arena, summer 2017, unbeaten. For me, that fight surpasses Froch-Groves 2. That fight surpasses Hatton Mayweather. There's other great domestic matches out there. We think Lennox Lewis, Frank Bruno. We think Ben versus Eubank. But for me, that particular fight, with the way boxing in Britain is going at present, and with the marketability of those two guys, I could see that being the biggest ever fight in British boxing. And in terms of the revenue, could that sell 80,000 tickets at Wembley? Yes. Could that do in excess of 1 million pay-per-view buys? Absolutely. Is that a fight where I could see the revenue being circa £30 million, $50 million, let's say? Yes, definitely. I think the market is there. And if we look at the fact that Joshua Martin card did 600,000 buys, when you factor in that Martin wasn't the most well known, let's put it this way, there were no Charles Martin fans ringing up to buy the pay-per-view. That pay-per-view was sold purely off Anthony Joshua's name. The undercard was weak. There was no Chris Eubank Jr. on the undercard. There was no James the Gale on the undercard. This wasn't a superstar undercard. There were some good fights, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't superstar. It wasn't celebrity. It wasn't bells and whistles. So when you take that into consideration, and when you look at how well that did, I think it's very foreseeable that a Fury or a Hay could surpass 1 million pay-per-view buys. Because for me, the one thing that sells boxing above and beyond all else is the hype and the bad blood that can be associated with a build-up. And Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua, it's an overused phrase, but the press conference alone for that fight would be pay-per-view. The hype leading up to that fight, the coverage leading up to the fight, and what I would anticipate would develop into the bad blood leading up to that fight would be astronomical. I think it could take British boxing to a whole new level. And for me personally, I think it could be at a level where we're talking maybe not even the biggest fight in British boxing. Maybe we get to a stage where, assuming Floyd Mayweather stays retired, that would actually be the biggest fight in boxing. Let's put it this way, and I know people will give me stick for this, but this is genuinely something that I'm considering. Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua, if built correctly, does more pay-per-view buys than Golovkin versus Canelo. Golovkin just sold 100,000 pay-per-view buys or something of that nature against David Lemieux. Tyson Fury did 500,000 when he fought for the world title or something of that nature. Anthony Joshua did 600,000 when he fought for the world title. This is a bigger fight than Kovalev Ward. This is a bigger fight than Canelo Golovkin. This is a bigger fight than Amir Khan versus Kell Brook. Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao in a rematch. It wouldn't be a fight I'd be as excited for, but I would acknowledge that's potentially a bigger market. But if Floyd stays retired, I think there's a solid case that that is the biggest fight in world boxing. Let me know your thoughts. What do these numbers mean to you? Are you excited by them? Are you still massively against the pay-per-view model? Let me know your thoughts. How do you see things developing? Do you agree with me that Joshua Fury does 1 million buys and fills out Wembley Stadium? If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. Help me spread this to a wider audience. If you're new to the channel, do hit the subscribe button. Wouldn't want you to miss out on some of the future stuff I'm going to do. Many thanks for watching. Hope you're all well. Cheers.